welcome to the second session, the afternoon session of the Electoral Boundaries Commission hearing in Calgary. By way of background, you can see the commission members, and I urge you to go to the website to see the bios of each of us. And our practice has been to allow for a bulk of time, 7 to 10 minutes for presentation, depending on how long the list is, and then engage in conversation. And sometimes there's a lot of dialogue between the commission members. And just as a reminder, the presentations are recorded and they will be on the website of the Electoral Boundaries Commission shortly. And the presentations are also transcribed in written form, and the Hansard version will be on the website as well. I don't have my PowerPoint. I have the clicker, but
no PowerPoint. Down on this one.
Oh, it is up there. Oh, okay. I've been clicking. Okay. Okay. I'm going to go quickly through the timeline here. I noticed that sometimes my introduction takes up way too much time. So that's why I've directed you to the website. A couple of main issues that are pushing the commission to do its work is, number one, we are expanding, the government has passed legislation to expand the number of seats in the provincial legislature from 87 to 89. So we have 2 new ridings to deal with, and we've got a huge population surge to respond to in terms of our task. Before we get to our task, I wanted to show you a bit of our timeline. Our timeline is outlined on the screen. The commission itself was appointed by the Speaker of the Legislature in late March. That starts the commission's clock running, and we have then 12 months within which to come up with a final report. And in the interim, the commission met a couple of times in April as a commission and to talk about procedures and schedules. And we started the public hearings in late May, and we're going throughout all of June and hearing from the public in presentations just like this. This is our 3rd week. We will conclude the first round of public hearings in late June, and we will deliberate, and we'll taking into consideration in our deliberations will be the presentations we hear throughout the province, the population numbers that we have before us, and the existing boundaries and proposed changes that we hear. We will issue a report which has come to be known as an interim report by late October, and that report will be filed with the Speaker of the Legislature and will become public. And if you've presented here and you want to follow our journey, you can look at that report. And after that report is made public, we will have a second round of public hearings. And after that round, we will be obligated by the legislation to come up with a final report, and that must be filed in late March 2026 with the Speaker of the Legislature. The Legislature will then take that report and pass appropriate enabling legislation as they see fit. As you know, Alberta currently is divided into 87 constituencies, will be 89 at the next election, and each constituency or riding or electoral division elects 1 member of the legislature. To give everyone a bit of perspective, we look back to the last commission, which issued its report in 2017. At that time, the commission dealt with a population that was just slightly over 4 million people. And you'll see the numbers here shortly as to how they distributed the constituency. Our situation is that we are dealing with a population based on the last decennial census of 2021 and regularly updated by Statistics Canada and the Alberta Treasury Board Office of Information and Statistics, such that we're at a population level of 4.88 million now. Last time, the Commission used this formula based on the population of 62,609, gave an mean average of population per electoral division of 46,697. There's a target range that surrounds that average number of minus 25 and plus 25, and you can see the figures for the last EBC in that slide. Our situation is obviously different because of the increased population, and the increase in number of electoral divisions brings us to an average of almost 55,000 population per riding. And a differential of minus 25 to plus 25, you can see, ranges from 41,000 plus to almost 69,000. Our job as a commission is to deal with the fact that the population increase hasn't been spread out evenly across the province. Our job, or our task, is to come up with a set of boundaries for 89 different electoral divisions that provides effective representation across the province. And in doing so, we consider several factors. And these are factors right out of the legislation. We deal with the relative sparsity and density of population throughout the province. We take into consideration, and we hear a lot about common community interest in places like Calgary, organizations, industry, culture. Those are very important factors in terms of keeping electoral divisions together. We also consider geographic features. Those are probably more common in the areas outside of Calgary and Edmonton, as well as communication and transportation lines across the province. Those are factors we consider. Our task, our goal as a commission is to come up with ridings that fit the definition of effective representation and provide understandable and clear boundaries. And part of that task is we recommend names of boundaries, or names of constituencies as well. And finally, the legislation gives the commission to consider other appropriate factors that we deem are important in coming up with our report. Many of those factors we will hear in the public hearings. So we come to the stage now, we want to hear from Albertans. And we spent all morning, a very productive, busy morning in this very same room, hearing from Calgarians about, and people from outside of Calgary about what they would like to see done. Now we are here to hear from probably 15 people this afternoon. So thank you for coming, and we appreciate your interest. This last several weeks has convinced all of us that democracy is robust, and it's an important thing on the part, important consideration of Albertans, and we thank you for coming out. So in light of that introduction, could I have the first presenter come? And you'll notice that I do look at my watch every once in a while because we tried to limit presentations to 7 minutes. I was wildly out of whack this morning. I let some people go on and had to cut others off, but I will try to keep the presentations running along on that category. We have a gadget that, as I understand it, will turn green, and if you see it turn yellow, maybe you should stop, maybe you can get through, but red, the floorboard doesn't make you disappear, but close. So Aaron Roth will be controlling that, and makes my job a little easier. So Daniel Nellis, you're the first presenter. Please come up. And as a, yeah, I did say that they are recorded. Actually, it might be helpful if you just spelled your last name when you present it. So please proceed, sir.
Sure, thank you. Dan Nellis. The last name is N-E-L-L-E-S. So good afternoon, members of the Commission, and I want to begin by thanking you for the opportunity to speak with you today and stress the importance of these public hearings. The public input process is absolutely critical in the Commission effectively fulfilling their duty under the Electoral Boundaries Commission Act, and as it provides members of communities from across Alberta opportunities to offer insight into the relevant considerations outlined in Section 14 of the Act. By way of background, I want to offer you some insight into why I've come before you today. My name is Dan Nellis, and I've been a resident of Airdrie since I was 4 years old. My family moved to the city around 1985, and other than a brief 4-year sojourn to Lethbridge for university, I've been a resident of Airdrie since that time, so around about 40 years all told. I chose to raise my family in Airdrie. I have 5 children, ranging in age from 20 years old all the way down to 3 years old. 1 attends post-secondary institution, 1 attends a public high school, 2 attend a Catholic elementary school, and 1 is enrolled in private daycare. My wife and I are members of Airdrie's Roman Catholic Church community. I'm the chair of Airdrie's Public Library Board of Trustees and a member of the board of the Airdrie Arts and Culture Council. I have a bachelor's degree in education as well as a master's degree in philanthropy and nonprofit leadership. I feel very in tune with the pulse of my community and very well connected to a variety of people in Airdrie, both through my voluntary endeavors as well as the activities of my family members. I felt compelled to speak with you today because I'm concerned that certain redistricting decisions could imperil the ability of Airdrie residents to have effective representation in our provincial legislature. As you can probably guess by this point, my comments today will largely center around the factors impacting the electoral district of Airdrie East and Airdrie Cochrane. The previous redistricting left many of us feeling confused and disconnected. A third of our community was excluded from the district in which most residents live, and it's my hope that this redistricting process will remedy previous missteps and ensure that residents achieve sensible, understandable electoral boundaries that respect communities within the municipality. One of the first considerations I must emphasize is that municipal boundaries need to be respected in that process. As noted, 1/3 of our community is currently situated within the riding of Airdrie Cochrane. Many of my friends within that district feel isolated and that their issues, which are in many ways unique to Airdrie, aren't heard as clearly as they are in Airdrie East. Moreover, there are significant concerns over the use of geographic features to draw our boundaries. Highway 2 is the major east-west division for the residents of our city, and Highway 567 and Yankee Valley Boulevard have been our traditional north-south divisions, although this has now been joined by 40th Avenue Southwest with the recent completion of the 40th Avenue overpass spanning over Highway 2. In looking at the current map, you can see that those more sensible dividing lines won't help address our issues of isolation. So we need to look at other factors. Airdrie residents have a strong affinity for and connection to their neighborhoods within the community. These neighborhood or community boundaries would be strong candidates for the use in the redrawing of any electoral boundary. Any division that would split a neighborhood apart would not be received well. It would be enormously confusing to residents. In looking at neighborhood maps, one thing that must be attended to is population growth. Population growth in Airdrie has been absolutely exponential during my 4 decades in the city, and it's only going to exacerbate. In 1984, our population was a mere 10,431, while today it now exceeds 90,000 people within the municipal limit. Projections put the total municipal population at well over 100,000 people by 2027, when our next provincial election is scheduled, and over 135,000 people by 2035, the latest that another Boundaries Commission must be convened. And I would note that this population projection is a conservative estimate, given the demonstrated real rate of growth in Airdrie in recent years. This means that considering Airdrie's municipal population alone, 2 electoral divisions that are equally divided with no rural components would actually serve populations of approximately 50,000 people each right now, kind of within your sweet spot, and 67,000 people each by the time another commission is appointed in about 10 years or so. Coincidentally, these numbers are close to the census total population for these districts just a few years ago. This rapid growth must be taken into consideration to ensure effective representation, not just today, but for residents in the years to come. I should point out that population growth is clustered in several areas of the city, referring to the lot inventory map from 2023 and the building permit heat map from also 2023. There are several communities and neighborhoods that are contributing disproportionately to our growth, and redistricting should consider this when drawing new boundary lines such that the rapid growth in these communities are accommodated. clearly, I'm arguing here for 2 electoral districts for Airdrie, set out in a manner that's not dissimilar to the current philosophy behind the boundaries for Lethbridge East and Lethbridge West, whose present populations are actually smaller than those in the hypothetical Airdrie East and Airdrie West, or Airdrie North and Airdrie South districts. Concentrating the electoral map divisions largely to municipal lines in Airdrie provides a much fairer representation for our population growth, but also creates a more cohesive representation situation for our residents. The current divisions act as more of a grab bag or catchment area for surrounding rural zones, and this is really not appropriate. Residents within the municipal boundaries in Airdrie have far more in common with each other than they do with residents in, say, Keoma. I urge you to use this opportunity to bring the people of Airdrie back together and draw boundaries that reflect the municipal limits. Airdrie has a unique political identity and unique values, and although I have nothing against our friends in Cochrane, it's far more appropriate for us to have Airdrie electoral districts that don't make a third of our residents feel like an afterthought. Our municipal issues should not be diluted by those of other major municipalities like Cochrane, who deserve effective representation in their own right. What must not happen is the continued dilution of Airdrie's interests by using our residents as balancing figures for rural populations. This very much feels like what was done with residents in the southwestern part of the city last time. Cochrane just needed a few more thousand people, so let's just pull them out of Airdrie. This cannot continue. Airdrie electoral districts that represent municipal boundaries should be the primary consideration, concentrating our issues and interests to the greatest extent possible, and intensifying the ability of our elected members to the legislature to more effectively advocate for our residents. I want to thank you very kindly for your time and consideration and for attending to the needs of the residents of Airdrie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nellis, for a rapid presentation, and I'm not sure...
There's a time limit.
I'm not sure if you reduced it to writing and submitted it to the commission, but if you can, please see Mr. Roth here, and a written copy would be appreciated. I'll start on this end. Mr. Evans, any questions or comments?
So, are you advocating for Airdrie being its own constituency, its own ED, or 2 EDs?
The population, well, I mean, you wouldn't want to do a single electoral district for Airdrie with currently 90,000 people. So given the target division of population, it would make more sense for 2 electoral districts for the municipality.
They would be below the number necessary. What kind of projection do what's your idea in terms of growth projection?
So the city of Airdrie has released population growth projections for the coming 10 years, and the current municipal census, which is due out within basically 3 weeks, the city council seems to be targeting or estimating about 91,000 people currently within the municipal boundary. That number is set to rise again fairly exponentially over the coming years, with more than 100,000 people by 2027 when our election is held. So 2 electoral districts representing the municipal city of Airdrie would put your target population at about 50,000 each currently, and as noted earlier in my statement, at about 67,000 by the time 2034 rolled around.
Okay. Sampson, any questions?
I have a thought I'd like your opinion on. Airdrie East is bigger than Airdrie West. What if the dividing line was not Highway 2? What if it was Main Street or something like that, and Airdrie East became its own riding, and Airdrie, the other Airdrie West, unfortunately would be a hybrid of some sort. And the reason why I'm wrapping my head around this is we only, as you know, receive 2 ridings, and the growth in population is greater than what's happening with you.
Yeah,
so I don't have 2 ridings to give to Airdrie. Well, you have 2 ridings, but yeah. What do you think of that, though? Like, if the border was moved over?
It might be possible. Again, what I would urge the Commission to consider is in the drawing of electoral boundaries, you would want to have something that would not split up a community. So Main Street might be one of those things, and indeed, if you look at the map, it's a little bit more of a curvy boundary than we would have with 8th Street, which is right now the division line between east and west. It might work. Obviously, trying to balance those population figures would be vital. Main Street might work just as well as 8th Street, but again, you would want to try and arrange electoral districts that as much as possible have a 50-50 division of the population of the municipality. If that was the case, I'm not sure Main Street would necessarily be the right one because we kind of have a heavier concentration in some of our southern communities. Kings Heights is probably the most populous community right now, and followed closely by Bayside and Cooper's Crossing. So there may need to be some consideration for a north-south rather than necessarily an east-west.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's good information.
Dr. Martin?
Thank you very much for your presentation. I take it that these graphics are yours.
These are drawn from the City of Airdrie website.
Oh, I wonder if you could arrange for copies of these to be given to Mr. Roth?
Absolutely.
Because, as always, these kind of visual aids are very helpful.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you as well about the two northern corners, northeast and northwest, that have colors on them. Am I to presume that these are within the current boundaries of the City of Airdrie?
Yes. So Sawgrass Park, Croxford Estates, Hamilton Greens, these are definitely within the municipal boundaries. Croxford Estates and Hamilton Greens are quite small from a population standpoint. They're more rural estates, if you wanted to style them that way. Same thing with Yankee Valley Estates, which is just cut in half by this particular graphic. But you can see here the municipal boundaries are the purple, right? And we have all of those neighborhood boundaries within them.
So you would anticipate in your request that all the municipal boundaries for this whole cordon sanitaire around the current neighborhoods, all of that would be held for one or two EDs, right? You're not going to abandon any of that?
Correct. We wouldn't want to hive off any of this. As I say, the focus would be on retaining the municipal boundaries as much as possible. And Airdrie, with its rapid growth, there are several new neighborhoods coming every single year. Some of the ones that are brand new this year, Vantage Rise and Key Ranch, they're just brand new this year, but they're going to have a number of individuals moving in there very soon. Same thing with Southwinds. So there's lots of space to grow within the municipal limit. The electoral districts should hopefully accommodate for that kind of growth and make sure that we stay together.
Can you move us to your heat map?
Yes.
This is amazing.
Yeah. Is this on the? I've done a little quick Googling, but I can't find this. Did you create this?
This is drawn from the 2024 growth report by Airdrie Economic Development.
Perfect.
I can also attach that to the
That'll be fabulous. Yeah, this
slide.
is incredibly helpful. Yeah, thanks.
So that's a feature in a report. It's not a computer program that you have access to.
Right. It is a feature in a public report from City of Airdrie.
Okay.
Yeah, if you could caption it, that'd be very helpful.
Fantastic. Great. I just found it, so I'll have it a good look at that. So part of what we talk about a lot on this panel is skating to where the puck is going to be.
Yes.
And I think in the case of Airdrie, the puck is a long way down the ice, and we need to skate pretty quick to catch up to it. And the growth is fairly clustered, but also quite clear. And you're absolutely right that even if that exponential curve flattens out a bit, it's still a lot and still big numbers. Having said all that, we are still, if we were to take just the contiguous urban area of Airdrie and call it 90,000 roughly today, that still makes us 2 times 45, which is quite a ways below the 55. If we needed to make up some numbers in the short term, as in for the purposes of this commission in the next couple of elections, are there specific areas in and around Airdrie you feel we could logically include?
As the chair of the library board, I would note that there's some map from the county of Rockyview, or county of Rockyview, that represent kind of where those residents receive library service. There's kind of a small rural donut around Airdrie that we see a lot of clients in the library from that rural donut. So that would make sense in terms of retaining those community members into our population, because they still receive service from the municipality.
That's great. That's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Nellis. Your presentation is very, very good and much appreciated for this niche area that we have to focus on. Thank you
kindly for your time.
Thank you.
Oh, Rajesh is not here. Okay. Okay. Lorraine Moulding? Can you put that one closer? Yeah. Excuse me, ma'am, would you mind sitting at that chair? Because if we have to have control of the PowerPoint, then that allows Mr. Roth to have access to that laptop.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity. And I do want to follow up on the gentleman.
Please introduce yourself and spell your last name. Sorry.
Lorraine Moulding, M-O-U-L-D-I-N-G. So thank you for the opportunity. And I just want to follow up on the gentleman from Airdrie, because I think he has raised a really basic fundamental principle of representation, which is that we need to be represented by our communities. And as much as possible, that needs to be supported. I think people need to trust that politicians are working in their best interests and in the best interest of their communities. And, you know, I think having opportunities like that helps to ensure that. I've been thinking a lot about the places and times I've lived and the differences that has made to me. So I've spent the last 50 years in large urban areas. But before that, I grew up in a rural area. And it's a very different environment. And I think it's really important that people's environments get represented. And so I think, as I remember growing up in a rural area, there certainly was a lot of suspicion of urban interests not being in alignment with what was happening in rural areas and what people's needs were. And I think we all have the same objectives in mind. We want our children and grandchildren to grow up with opportunities, to have health care, education, good transportation, all those kinds of things. And that's what we depend on our governments for. But how that happens is different in different areas and is different for different kinds of populations. So for me, that's a key fundamental value in terms of how do I get represented? And I know that you have a difficult job ahead of you. You know, the gentleman from Airdrie certainly outlined that. Because maybe dividing it into two doesn't quite get you at your magic numbers. But I think there's something really important about those principles that we do our democracy on. And so, you know, like we think about infrastructure, and it's different in urban areas and it's different in rural areas. And if we start mixing up our ridings, how then does one lone person represent those voices? How can I advocate, if I'm the MLA, how do I advocate for my rural needs and my urban needs if it's all, we're just sort of doing this, how do we get these numbers lined up right? So you have a hard job in front of you, I recognize that. And then there's other differences. I graduated from high school in 1967, and I wanted to be an engineer. And when I applied for engineering, they told me I had to take an extra year of study just to prove I wanted to be an engineer. I won't tell you what I said, but that's not what I did. So there are those kind of differences as well that our MLAs have to represent. So I think had some principles. So I think these are things that you need to think about really hard when you're thinking about how do we divide these things up. And I think population is important. And so, you know, we've had a tremendous population growth in Calgary, probably the largest population growth in the province. So that needs to be taken into consideration. But new seats should also represent both the cultural, current and future population growth. Municipalities should be kept intact as much as possible so that their unique needs are represented. And communities who have things in common, whether that's cultural, economic, geographic, should be kept intact. And those are things that I think are really important. And I'm done. So,
okay.
Sorry, any questions?
I may have missed it saying, do you reside in Airdrie? Or?
No, I reside in Calgary.
Okay.
But I'm just saying that okay. I think he gave a really good representation of why municipalities need to be represented.
And what electoral division?
I'm in Calgary Klein.
Fine.
Yeah, so I may or may not be affected by the boundary.
We had a couple of presenters from Calgary Klein, and I think their bottom line was, leave us alone. Don't touch our boundaries. As I recall. But
yeah,
anyway, I'll let the other commissioners engage. Mr. Evans, any questions or comments?
No questions.
Okay.
Thank you for coming out, but I don't have any questions.
No, thanks. Okay. No, actually, I appreciate your comments, and I think you make a good and a compelling case for not blending constituencies. While we're talking about Airdrie, I just happened to look at a note from this morning. Presenter from Cochrane. We like Airdrie. We don't like being part of Airdrie. So, so it's just an interesting. It sort of builds on what you talked. So, anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. That then takes us to Ross Lennox. Okay. Jim Ridley.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Just have a seat and just spell your last name for...
Sure, it's Ridley, R-I-D-L-E-Y.
Thank you.
First name is Jim. So I reside in the Banff-Kananaskis constituency district. I was brought up in Calgary with 3 university degrees, one of which is a graduate degree. Worked for the province for a number of years as a park ranger out in the Kananaskis, and served 3 terms on the Town of Canmore Town Council. Not presently on that council. Well, thank you for the opportunity to describe what I feel are unique aspects of the Banff-Kananaskis electoral district, which I will refer to as the riding. I begin by referring to dynamics of population change I've noticed then present characteristics of that demographic. And last, I would like to offer recommendations. Sources of my information are attached, and I can provide a copy of that. So it appears that your work is based largely on a reasonable and fair comparison of population numbers throughout the province. You're looking at the 2021 census of Canada, which under calculation established an average of roughly 55,000 constituents per riding. Banff-Kananaskis is currently just under that average. I would point out, however, that while we have observed reductions in rural populations elsewhere, our riding has since 2021 experienced an increase in residential development with concurrent increase in population numbers. The trend, looking at the 2016 census, the Banff-Kananaskis riding increased from 46,000 plus to 52,000 plus in the 21 census, or 11.5%. While I cannot provide you with 25 riding population numbers, Canmore similarly increased 12% from 2019 to 2024. Based on development approvals by various land use authorities throughout the riding, I think it logical to extrapolate that with future development, populations will continue to increase in the foreseeable future. In addition to comparing numbers of constituents, you are charged with applying various regulations, guidelines, and other demographic considerations that may result in adjusting the legislative representation of each riding. Let us now look at characteristics of some select communities throughout the riding. Banff and Lake Louise utilized the need to reside clause under the Federal Parks Act and regulations, resulting in limits to physical townsite growth and stable permanent population. Banff's limit to permanent population is set at the current 10,000, resulting, as an aside, in over 600 adult workers commuting from Canmore to Banff daily. The riding's largest municipality is the town of Canmore. In March of 25, a population count of 17,200 in 2024, this is from Provincial Office of Statistics and Information of the Alberta Treasury Board and Finance. So in 24, Canmore had 17.2. A detailed report in the Calgary Herald explained the approved area structure plans on the Three Sisters development lands and was headlined as new developments, quote, new developments will double Canmore's population in 20 years, end of quote. So that would result in 34,400. In addition to the Three Sisters development, the areas of Silvertip and Palliser have received area structure plan approvals for resort development, the former, and affordable housing, the latter. In summary, although development takes time, it may be prudent to factor limited but certain growth into planning for what legislative representation is needed in this town, soon to be a city. Other areas of the riding offer insights where we can and cannot expect growth. 1. A sizable and measurable number of property owners do not actually live in the Bow Valley, rather own holiday property there and vote elsewhere. This is a very unique situation in the province. Nonetheless, the MLA for the area is responsible to provide cost-effective services, provincial supports, and everyone in this community, whether they reside there permanently or not. 2, 350 homeowners in the town site of Redwood Meadows are located on Indigenous land through long-term leaseholds. No further development of this area is anticipated beyond the roughly 875 persons there now. Not governed under Municipal Government Act like other municipalities, this community still needs representation. 3, the Springbank Area Structure Plan in Rocky View County received final approval on March 25th of this year, planning a total of 20,145 persons in the Springbank area. Much of this will be accommodated through the subdivision of what is now farmland and or acreages. And I do have a breakdown of that number based on who is there now, what is planned for infill development, and what is planned for new development, which is attached to my submission. The Harmony community west of Springbank Airport is planned not under an ASP, but rather an approved conceptual scheme, and is only at 6% build-out, expected to have approximately 4,480 residents. 2.5 people per residence. That's roughly another 10,000 people. 5, Millerville area is split among 2 ridings, BK and Highwood, and should be amalgamated in BK. Now, to understand the characteristics of some population members in the riding, I would like to highlight the following geographic and cultural factors. The families located in the eastern part of the riding, Morley, Harmony, Springbank, Redwood Meadows, Bragg Creek, Millerville, Satina, and Priddis, possess a huge respect for the natural environment, many living adjacent to the wonderful Kansas Country Park system, and who prioritize natural environment protections. You may know that this 1,600 square kilometer provincial park area is largely within the Banff-Kananaskis riding. It is immediately adjacent to 2 provincial parks in BC, plus adjoins to Banff and Jasper National Parks, together comprising the largest contiguous protected parklands in the world. I would respectfully ask that the similar needs, interests, and lifestyles of these smaller eastern communities continue to be included in the Banff-Kananaskis electoral division. My recommendations to the Commission are as follows. 1, anticipating change and indeed growth in this riding is an important determination to how the riding is structured. Planning for growth is, in my view, an important factor in assigning where boundaries ought to and ought not to be adjusted. The date from the next federal census is released with a 2-year lag, meaning the results from the 2026 census will not be available to us until 2028. But the work of the Commission will inform riding boundaries for the next scheduled election in 2027. 2, the importance of this riding to the economic well-being of the province could be an important consideration in your determination of what legislative representation is needed in this riding. Currently, 4 million visitors travel to the Bow Valley annually. The province of Alberta has forecast and has goals to move this number to 10 million visitors within 10 years. While permanent populations need to be serviced everywhere, so do the countless numbers of visitors. It is now and will increasingly become a challenge for whoever the legislative representative is for Banff-Kananaskis, who work hard to provide provincial government support to municipalities, residents, and visitors in terms of ancillary programs and services, i.e. hospitals, affordable housing, sustainable transportation, utility infrastructure, social services, recreation, policing, etc. The boundaries of the riding are, in my 3, and my final recommendation, the boundaries of the riding are, in my view, currently acceptable, and other than Millerville, should remain the same. It has only been since 2015 that Banff-Kananaskis existed as an ED, and legislative representatives since that time have tried to meld the interests and characteristics into a manageable whole. They have succeeded, I believe, and continue to not only respect the differences that citizens throughout the riding may exhibit, but also find commonalities in the management of this all-important natural area we call Banff-Kananaskis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Clark, any questions?
Just maybe if you could, 2 things. If you could just reiterate your views on Millerville. I was just looking it up and trying to find it on a map while you were talking about that. So if you can just tell me again, because I know a previous presenter
yes, they've used a highway, road allowance to divide the boundary. And there are some folks that live on the south side that highway that are in Highwood constituency. And so it's a very small area, very few number of people, but it seems sense to perhaps have a representative in Edmonton looking after the whole community.
And would you rather that be in Banff-Kananaskis or Highwood? Okay. And then you mentioned the Springbank ASP. Is that north or south of Highway 1 or both?
Both.
Both, okay.
Yeah. So it's part of Rocky View County, of course, but they have done an area structure plan just for Springbank, and that received final 3rd reading and is in effect now. I can give you the numbers here. Briefly, 4,200 population in existing built-out areas. These are population, not residences. They plan to add 5,749 folks through infill residential and 10,172 folks through new residential. So that adds up to about as I mentioned earlier, a huge number of folks just in Springbank.
Thank you.
Dr. Martin?
Thank you. Thank you. You're absolutely right about how important this area is and just how much car traffic, tourist traffic comes through it. But you, in your presentation, walked us through a lot of other areas that are in the current district boundaries. And you have rural, country estates. You have a lot of the whole range of housing forms, it would seem to me. And I want to ask you if they all get along together.
My sense is that they likely have specific interests for specific areas, but the commonality that I was speaking to is a respect for the natural environment, whether it's rangeland, whether it's recreational acreage properties, horse riding, hiking, the fishing, the outdoor pursuits that folks find throughout the whole riding, whether it's a more rural residential setting or whether it's in a town in the mountains.
Do you also have some cattle ranching?
I don't personally, but there is some cattle ranching, yes.
So the reason I'm pressing you on this
on Morley sediment. And,
the reason I'm pressing on this is that we have heard from time to time in our deliberations, people say with horror, oh my, we couldn't have people with that kind of housing configuration because they don't share our community of interests. What do you say to that? Obviously, you're not as you're not as fierce as others about the presence of these many different forms of lifestyle.
Well, I think we've come to accommodate the area as a more natural environment than you would find perhaps in the city of Calgary. So if one is looking at expropriating rangeland or rural property into Calgary, I think it would be better to keep it as it is, as part of a more rural, geographically contiguous area.
Thank you.
That answers your question.
It does.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out today. Did you want to make any comments on the Indigenous population found in that riding? Do you see any growth changes, anything that would affect our decisions? Are the boundaries representing them and their needs adequately?
It's an interesting question because many of the policies that affect our Indigenous population are federal policies, although some services, of course, are provided through the province and by the province. But it would seem that the inclusion of the two reserves in our riding right now are complementary. There are portions of the Morley area that are north of our riding that could be considered to be part for an administrative purpose from their perspective. I do know that the populations have increased in these settlements. I don't have the data on that, but there is a general growth. So it's not a reduction in numbers of constituents in both those areas that I am familiar with.
Good, thank you.
Evan? Can you give me the numbers, your projected growth again, your calculations on Canmore?
Well, we're at 17.2 right now. Now, I did see one report that suggested that there was a smaller number of non-resident property owners. And when I was on council, the municipal census pointed to 25% of the population being non-resident. But they are speaking about, through the approved area structure plans right now, they'd be doubling that plus. So the Three Sisters land has approval to double from roughly 18,000 or 17,000 to 34,000, plus the Silvertip area, which is to be and is a resort community, and the Palliser lands, which have been dedicated by both the province and the town for affordable housing, of accommodating between 1,000 and 2,000 individuals down on the valley bottom.
Okay, and then you mentioned some projected growth for Springbank. What were those numbers?
Yes, and that is comes straight from their area structure plan of 20,145 at build out.
That would be the increase.
No. Currently, there's 4,000. Excuse for a moment. 4,233 in the Springbank area currently. So that would be adding another 16,000.
Okay.
Population is approved.
And then was there any other? I think there was one more area.
Army.
Okay. And what was that one?
Sure. At build out, they're 4,480, and they're at 6% build out right now.
To 4,480.
Yeah, population. No, I'm sorry, residents.
And then we would multiply that by
language, I guess.
2.5.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Ridley, thank you very much for your very well-researched presentation.
Thank you. I'm sorry to run a little over on there.
Okay, our next presenter is Marty Heek. Oh, okay. Is there any other presenter here that may be further down the list? Well, you want to make a presentation? Yeah. A commentary on the presentations made.
Can we?
Sure can. Come forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll introduce ourselves too.
Yep.
My name is Tala Abhayane. I am the president of the Students Association of Mount Royal University, and I'm joined here with
Mariana Mejia Salazar, the Vice President External of the Students Association of Mount Royal University.
Okay.
We sent in a written submission before the deadline in May, but we just wanted to highlight a few more things today, just to kind of go over where Mount Royal right now is situated.
Sure.
The students of Mount Royal are spread across the city, and they even live in other areas outside of the city, like in Calgary as well. We have students that commute into Calgary from all over the place, even in Chestermere and Strathmore as well, even Cochrane too. We will always like to highlight how important it is to consider where students are situated within the city, and how Mount Royal at the moment is at the edge of a riding. If we were to be included more within a specific boundary, it would make more sense.
Are you in Curry right now, or what?
I think we are. No.
I thought we were Calgary Elbow.
Calgary Elbow, sorry.
Calgary Elbow.
Yeah.
Okay, the campus is in Calgary Elbow.
Calgary Elbow, yeah.
Okay.
But we are closer to the Curry area,
Right.
and right now we're just at the edge of a riding. And yeah, thanks so much for pulling that up. Elbow. Yeah. Almost there. There we go. Yes. So just right there,
Right.
by Sarcee and Richardson. We're just below that.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of our students live actually just above that area. Like they live in the Glamorgan, which is still within Elbow, but they live above that area, closer to Westbrook, the more affordable areas to live within. Right now, we are coupled in an area where there are a lot more affluent neighborhoods that also sometimes underrepresents the interest of our students who live in that area as well. In the past, it has prevented our campus from being reached by the Blue Line that was initially built in the city, because the interest of folks that live in the neighborhood did not align with public transportation and, bringing down the value of their properties. So we just want to make sure that our students, no matter where they live in the city, whether it's around Elbow, whether it's around Curry, and beyond, that they are considered in a lot of those decisions that make sense to them, especially when it comes to the municipal issues. So And I know there's a lot of crossover with that. So transit is always municipal/provincial thing to consider. But I'll just pass on to Mariana for some more thoughts.
Yeah, as Tala was speaking on, we have neighborhoods such as Bel Air and the Upper Mount Royal as part of our district, which have a median average of home prices being from $2.5 million all upwards to $3 million, which is not something that students can afford. So what we're truly asking is for the student body to be recognized as an entire community rather than just citizens of the area, so that we can work on different things like transit and affordability for housing and other aspects for the student's life that unfortunately are just not things that we can currently work on with the mentioned neighborhoods that we have a part of. So thinking of maybe being part of the Curry electoral district would be something that would be greatly beneficial towards all students, not just the Mount Royal students, but other neighborhoods around as well. There are various different institutions that are around that area that are not necessarily just post-secondary.
Yeah. We're happy to take any questions that you might have about the specific Mount Royal situation. And if there's any data, any more information that we can provide, then we can definitely submit that to you in addition to what we've already submitted.
Curious to know, and maybe it's public knowledge, and I should know, what's the student population student population?
Including credit and non-credit students, we have just above 15,000 students at the moment. 75% of them are Calgary local residents. So that is a huge population that Mount Royal serves the Calgary community in terms of supplying post-secondary to that community. So we have local Calgarians that attend Mount Royal, 75% of them. Then we expand beyond Calgary, so the outside of community, and then within Alberta as well. And then our international student population is just under 5%. And then we have students that come from all across Canada as well. And other
so you could be classified as the city's university.
We are in the Northwest, so we'll be respectful of our youth folks. But
okay. Other questions? Dr. Martin?
Do it.
Well, thank you for that. As I told the presenter from the Student Union at the University of Calgary, I'm on the Board of Governors of MacEwan University, so I understand about the important effects on a town of having this population of students and the difficulty of finding adequate housing units. I wanted, though, to ask you something about your assertion of the student numbers. Is that full-time learning equivalent numbers?
Yes.
Okay.
That is the data that we received from MRU.
Right.
This is the most recent data that we received for 2024, but our population is constantly growing, so we can always come back with more updated numbers if need be. And I appreciate the context that you're providing for being at MacEwan. MacEwan is a very similar size institution to us, and similar size institutions in Alberta, like Mount Royal and MacEwan, sometimes tend to be overlooked compared to the other bigger universities in the province in terms of the funding that we receive, in terms of the community service that we provide. We serve a larger population of Alberta residents as in comparison to bigger universities. And in terms of provincial representation, when it comes to the Ministry of Advanced Education, how we are funded, we're actually not being funded adequately. And I think that is a big part of how we would want our electoral districts to really reflect the university situation as well in terms of grant funding.
Well, I won't comment on any of that.
Yeah, for sure.
But I was startled by your remark about perhaps moving into Calgary. Is that a function of grand disappointment, or is the grass just greener over there?
We can always come back to you with that. We can always come back to you with more information about that. That is something that we started to look into actually after we submitted our document to you in May. We kind of started looking into more research in case we got more questions about our submission. But I can always come back to you with that.
Well, in practice, you would have to come back to the commission more generally than to me in particular. But perhaps Mr. Roth would be able to give you the contact information you need. Thank you.
Mr. Clark?
Just a reminder. remind me, and apologies if it was in your written submission, do we more residences being developed on campus? Is that something that you see happening?
I can't speak specifically to the Mount Royal situation because as far as I know, Mount Royal is still paying off the mortgage on the previous residence that was built in 10 years ago for West residences. But until that is built, that is paid off, and if we receive more funding, there could be a possibility. But right now, MRU is
nothing imminent to read. Okay,
not at the moment. Thank you. But our East residences are in need of reconstruction, and that is an opportunity for us to put more on-campus housing.
They certainly are. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for coming out and stepping up. I just wanted to let you know that when we were in Edmonton, both Grant MacEwan and University of Alberta made a presentation on behalf of the student population. So I must say you are all jointly heard. Thank you for that.
That's what we do.
Gentlemen?
No, nothing. Questions. Thank you.
Maybe you said it, and maybe it's in your written presentation, but any idea what the resident population is on MRU's campus?
I believe that our West residence has over 1,000 beds. So there is a student population that resides on campus, and we are actually at capacity with our residents every semester now, every year since for the last 2 years. We've actually had a wait list of above 100 students also needing housing. We also do have Indigenous housing on campus that specifically supports Indigenous families and mature students. So that is also a population to be considered.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for spontaneously coming up as we asked.
Thank you for your time, and we'll follow up with the other information that we've been requesting.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Marty Haig. Sorry, just yeah. No worries. Okay. Yes, please proceed.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. As you know, my name is Marty Haig. I'm from Calgary Glenmore, live in the Lakeview neighborhood in Calgary Glenmore with my wife, Jane. And I have 3 children, 2 stepkids, and a daughter. And I've lived in Alberta for 45 years. Been very fortunate to have a couple of good careers in Alberta. Initially, I was, for the first 15 years of my professional life, I was a sportscaster back in the heyday when Alberta won 6 Stanley Cups in 7 years. And that was primarily with CBC. And also, the last 30 years, I've been a clinical social worker. The last 15 years, a lot of my clinical social work hasn't been so much counseling, but more in the areas of organizational development, leadership development, and a lot with universities, the University of Calgary and the University of Saskatchewan. So I give you this background because I think it certainly impacts my lens as I share with you today about my perceptions of Calgary Glenmore. I'm very interested in young people. That's another element of my discussion, I think, today. So with Calgary Glenmore, I would see it as, at this point in time, a very credible riding. It makes sense to me. There's a lot of connectedness among neighborhoods. I have friends and acquaintances in Woodbine and in Oak Ridge, and throughout our riding, Haysboro, and it's a riding, I think, where there's a lot of connectedness with needs and at the same time unique needs. So I'm not an expert in electoral boundaries, but what I'm saying, I guess, is that it seems to be a credible way of having things put together. What I observe is that there's a big difference between where I live and my experience and the friends I have in Springbank and the friends and family I have in rural Alberta. So I guess this is kind of obvious, but in some sense, I think that's a pretty basic, fundamental consideration at this point in time. So again, I see unique needs, I see connectedness, and I see that we're different from other jurisdictions. And to me, it seems like at this point in time, our provincial electoral boundaries are kind of lined up as far as our riding goes with our, municipal boundaries. I think the piece that I wanted to touch with you folks on today is in some ways kind of relates in a way to credibility and the credibility of the Calgary Glenmore riding. And the reason I mention this is really what I come to you with today, and I know you folks understand this, and I say this very respectfully, but more than anything, I guess as a 69-year-old guy who's really concerned about young people, I guess more than anything what I try to focus on in my discussions is supporting voter engagement and decisions that make sense, that create folks having interest. I think about my daughter and my niece and nephew who are younger people, and how do we keep them aligned with our process? So when I look at what we're dealing with today, I see that Calgary Glenmore is credible. And when I was a leadership trainer at university, the primary paradigm in the curriculum lots of times, and you folks have practiced this or you wouldn't be as successful as you are, was credibility. Does it make sense? Am I believable? And I think also another key component today, and this kind of comes from my other career, is competitiveness. And I think lots of times competitiveness really impacts credibility. And I talk about this stuff with my kids. And where I'm going with that is that I think competition lots of times is very good for credibility. We make our case, we see what happens, and the best case wins. I think where things get difficult is when competition gets a little bit too intense and there's temptation to push it too hard. And I go back to my sports life, and I'll give you a recent example. I think the Canadian soccer program was very, very credible. I think they lost some credibility last year before the Olympics because the temptation to win got to be too extreme, and we had that drone issue. And my heart sank when that happened. And that's what I don't want to see my kids experience in the political system. And I think it already probably has to some degree. I know you folks understand this, and I just say it respectfully, but I think that's the piece that I kind of have my eye on. So credibility, competition, is there a balance? And it's easy to rationalize, and I think the Oilers did a bit of this last night. The other guys are doing it, right? And I think that's a tricky point in all this. Really, I'm a person who worked as a leadership consultant and a therapist and challenged myself about my awareness and my blind spot. And this is what I just try to talk to people about today. No matter what their political stripe or no matter what really the conversation is, if it's appropriate, I try to raise this idea of, are we rationalizing? Are we being honest with ourselves? Are we trying to create a fair game? So I really thank you for your time and your effort, and really respect your contribution here. And I'm grateful just to be with you today. So thank you. And in television, I always came out on time, 7 minutes.
And now we'll have the sport. Thank you very much, Mr. Heeg. Any questions, Mr. Evans, or comments?
I'm interested in looking at, when you look at the current electoral district, is there really connectivity within that electoral district with with the northern part, that which is on the other side of the Glenmore Reservoir, compared with those that are on the south side?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I haven't tried to develop any data to support that, but my sense is, knowing folks in those areas, those neighborhoods, there seems to be a good connectiveness. As you point out, we're on the north side. We're in Lakeview there. So, I mean, when I'm down in, I have a good friend in Oak Ridge. It seems like we have common things in unique needs. That's what it seems like to me.
Is there any sort of a common, something that draws Lakeview south, that's on the south side of Glenmore, that you drive over there to shop, to go to church, to whatever you do?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we do those sorts of things over there. I mean, certainly, shopping and visiting people and playing sports and that kind of thing. So, other than that, in terms of natural connections, again, it's more just my experience than anything else that informs me with that.
Is it a bit difficult to drive there?
Not particularly, no. It's interesting for me because my wife and I moved from Edgemont about 3 years ago, and it's really interesting just how much time we spend in those southern areas now because it's fairly accessible. It probably takes me, at the most, 12, 14 minutes to get to the very south part of our area there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Slightly different approach to your presentation to us, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Because all of us around the table here are new to this work, and I believe that the boundaries, that is the start, the grassroots, and it is really the foundation of democracy that we're going to build on, and that we're going to showcase to the rest of Albertans. And this is not a question, but I can guarantee you that from myself, I will do the job. And when it does not align with the things I have heard here, it will be in the report. And we're opening it up for a second look at it after we write it. But I had no idea it was going to be this complex or difficult. And we're going to please some of the people some of the time. And we're going to try real hard.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I really respect that. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks.
I'm struggling to find a way to exclude the Earl Grey Golf Course. He's a member. I don't think I'll succeed, but I'm really interested in your point of view as a clinical social worker. My mother was a medical social worker, so I understand the heroic work that gets involved. So do you feel that you have built out a robust infrastructure for children and youths to provide the opportunities and the training that goes along with soccer programs and swimming programs and whatever particular program is devised? Do you think your ED is rich in these kind of cultural infrastructure activities?
What a great question. I think there's a tremendous amount of growth that could happen. I mean, and building in those areas. I mean, I look at counseling and clinical social work in a very broad sense, and that every opportunity is a learning opportunity, and there can be so much that could be built into sports in a more formal way where people can learn how to work through their feelings of failure or their feelings of grandiosity. In my case, those sorts of things where you can have a growth opportunity. I think that's a great idea, and I think there's a lot of potential for that. So the answer would be no. I don't think it's been really built up.
Okay, this was my way actually of trying to see if the areas south of the reservoir cohere.
That's a good question. I mean, I'm not, you know, I'm just not that familiar at this point in my career with how things are connected there. I don't have any, formal role in that way. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. One of the nice benefits we get in this job is you get to go around the province and see different places. And for my fellow commissioners, this feels a lot like Edmonton Riverview to me. Yeah. You've got two sides. So recognition. Yeah, it's inside. Go ahead and look at the map, and you'll see it's similar. It's on two sides of the North Saskatchewan and Edmonton. And I think your point is right. You come out of Glenmore Trail and you make a right-hand turn. You make a right-hand turn on 14th Street. You're down to the shopping areas down there, and so I can see how this all hangs together. But I did want to ask a bigger or kind of general question based on one of your earlier your opening comment. Maybe kind of bring it back full circle to that. You talked about Calgary, Glenmore, Springbank, and rural Alberta are all kind of different things. Can you maybe quantify that or just speak to what that means and what that looks like to you?
Well, I mean, I think it's a lot of it is based on kind of a vibe. You know, when I talk to people about their needs, their interests, some of it is observable when I'm out in Oyen visiting with my cousin. It's obviously different. There's so I mean, I think it, structurally different. I mean, in terms of the residences, it's more of I'm sure there's lots of socioeconomic data. I grew up in Saskatchewan, and I had a keen sense of community there. And I went to school in one little community, and I played ball and hockey over here at another community that were 20 miles apart, and it was just different. And it was just a gut feeling. Now I know now if I were to go back and look at the data that was mixed farming. They didn't have the kind of quality of land that we had over here. And they were just different. So, I mean, I think those are the kinds of things that we are trying to represent because there's a unique need. And I think the same thing would be happening between Springbank and what's happening in Calgary, Glenmore.
That's helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. What part of Saskatchewan did you go up?
Farming area just east of Rosetown. Yeah.
I'm from Saskatchewan as well. Thanks for the shout out there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Higg. You're excused. I believe that takes care of all of the presenters before our break. So why don't I make use of the time? We'll have our break now. There's no one else that is scheduled to present that hasn't presented in the room, I assume. Okay. So we'll take our 10-minute break now, and then when we return at about 2:35, I'll be generous for 10 minutes, 2:35. Then hopefully we can continue the list. Our first presenter is Ms. Bernadette Maxwell. So please,
I don't know. Does this work?
It should. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And normally we have seven minutes for presentation, and then we have 3 or 4 minutes for question and dialogue from the commission. So, okay. So please proceed.
Okay. I haven't done this before, so anyways. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Bernadette Maxwell. I live in South Calgary. I'm here to respectfully request adjustments to the Calgary-Albo Electoral District to ensure fair representation and help address what I and many residents see as a case of modern gerrymandering in this electoral district. The current boundaries carve up some of the communities in ways that dilute their voice and misalign with the realities of how people live, work, and connect. First, I urge the Commission to include the community of Richmond-Nob Hill within the Calgary-Albo electoral area. Richmond-Nob Hill community is closely aligned with other Marda Loop communities of Altadore, River Park, Garrison Woods, and South Calgary, which are all part of the Marda Loop Community Association. These neighborhoods are tightly knit with shared schools, parks, and the Marda Loop Business District. These two community associations also work together on various development and planning matters with the city related to the development in Marda Loop. I'll go back to the map in a minute. Second, I propose that the Lakeview community in its entirety be included in Calgary-Albo. It makes no sense to split part of a community across multiple electoral districts. Glamorgan could be removed and Lakeview included, which also fits more naturally within the Calgary-Albo district, as it lies directly south of existing Albo communities and shares similar demographic, economic, and social characteristics. In contrast, Glamorgan is much further west with a distinct community profile and should be grouped accordingly. Third, I recommend removing Lower Mount Royal from Calgary-Albo and including it in Calgary-Buffalo. Lower Mount Royal is a highly urban neighborhood very near the 17th Avenue entertainment area with very different needs and priorities than the largely residential mixed-density communities to the south and west of it. Its inclusion in Calgary-Albo skews representation and doesn't reflect community cohesion. Fourth, when considering the amount of development and growth within the Marda Loop area communities, projected to add 3,000 new residents in the next 2 years, it may be necessary to shift Lincoln Park to Calgary-Curry to get the correct projected numbers within each area. I don't know what numbers targets you're working at, but I have some numbers on growth and development that we're projecting in Marda Loop. In summary, the boundaries for Calgary-Albo should more naturally include the communities between McLeod Trail and Crowchild Trail from east to west, and between Glenmore Trail and 26th Avenue / Prospect Avenue from south to north. If additional numbers are still needed, the district to get the once you consider the expected growth, then you might want to look at a couple of communities west of Crowchild Trail towards 37th Street, like Rutland Park and Lincoln Park, which are currently included. But this grouping would better respect the historical, social, and geographic realities and strengthen democratic representation. Thank you for your time and your efforts to ensure Alberta's electoral map is fair, functional, and community-focused. I'm just going to take a minute and kind of point out on the map what I'm saying.
Please step forward and do that.
Does this still work? Okay, so basically what I'm saying is I think this area here is good. I'm not sure why Lakeview is split. So half of Lakeview is here and half of Lakeview is there. So I'm saying rather than having Glamorgan included, you should include Lakeview. And then I'm also saying up here is Richmond. And we live in South Calgary. We work closely with the Richmond Community Association. There's a lot of development in Marda Loop. And so there's, the community associations are working together. So that's why I'm saying that should be included as well. And Lower Mount Royal, so up here, that area should be, you could split that off on Prospect Avenue, because again, that's more urban, that's more downtown. And so then this would kind of just create this nice little square. What I'm not sure is your numbers. You may want to include these two communities of Rutland Park and Lincoln Park, but I've got some numbers that I can give you. I'm on the development committee for Marda Loop Communities Association, and we did a kind of a presentation on the growth that we're experiencing in Marda Loop. And there are, basically there's 1,894 residential units between development stage, recently completed, under construction, development, rezoning, or coming soon. So about 2,000 units.
In Marda Loop alone? In
Marda Loop, yeah. So that's the communities of Altadore, Garrison Woods, and South Calgary. And so the projected, so somewhere either between low, medium, or high, it's, you know, the medium amount is about 3,000 new residents in the next 2 years. So you need to consider that when you're looking at the boundaries as well, because otherwise your numbers will be out very quickly.
Did you say 3,000?
3,000, yeah. And that's all I've got.
Okay, thank you. And you're in the amber zone. The amber zone. Thank you. Did you say this? You've never done this before?
No.
Well, you're a pro by all appearances. I'm sure there'll be some questions. Mr. Clark?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking back here. I've gone back as far as 2003. So Calgary Elbow, at least dated 2003. I'm just frantically flipping through the 1996. But Elbow has fundamentally looked the same since at least 2003. And I'm just, like I say, I'm trying to find the maps in 1996 so I could kind of get back to that. So it's it hasn't changed a lot. It's sort of been a little bit increased. That little bottom bit there, that I agree, it's a bit odd, because Glenmore Trail is obviously your natural boundary. That is, and we've looked at this, it's technically North Glenmore Park, because that's where the community hall is. And so Glenmore Trail has historically been the boundary. And so, yeah, part of our struggle is we've got constituencies that are about average on number. And so where we have an Elbow being one of them, it's basically tracked the average. So we're trying to not have changes that are going to cascade, and so is Curry, and kind of so are the adjacent constituencies. So I don't really know if I necessarily have a question, more just in response to some of your submission. I think part of the rationale for why it is what it is the population. I would really be interested in if you have that development data and details.
I do.
If you can give that to Erin, that would be fantastic, because we'll get that uploaded to our portal, because that's really helpful. Thank you.
Erin.
Right here.
It's right behind you. Yeah.
Okay. There you go. Thank you.
Okay. Julian, any questions?
Yes, thank you. And we had the MLA in earlier this morning.
Oh, okay.
And he suggested, yes, growth, but very incremental, and he characterized it largely as basement suites going legal and things of that sort. And so do you see that kind of activity in the neighborhoods you have been speaking of this afternoon?
There is some of that, but I'm on the development committee for Marda Loop.
Right.
And they're proposing 2 19-story towers on 33rd. They're proposing an 18-story on 34th. And all along 33rd, everything is going 6-story. There's 2 or 3 development or land use planning, land use amendments coming up on 33rd for 6-story, 50-unit buildings. I think 3 of them. So on the information that I passed out, we were kind of looking at, trying to understand how much that there's a lot of housing development and there's no green space, and so that's kind of the analysis that we were doing to come up with it, and that's where we came up with the 3,000 people, and that's a 25% increase of what Marda Loop is right now. Again, just those three communities, South Calgary, Garrison, and Altadore. That 25% in 2 years is based on the development permits that are, you know, underway or in progress.
Well, thank you for that, because, you know, people do talk to us about growth in very general terms, and who can deny that that is happening in a general sort of way. But for our purposes, it's valuable to know that there is growth that's imminent and tangible. They scrape the dirt. They're starting to put in the girders. I call it the Tyvek test. Because we can't project too far in the future, can we? But what you've suggested then is you are convinced that the planning permits and permissions that have been given out signal the beginning of construction.
Yes, yes. It's kind of detailed more on those slides, and there are some that are, there was 5 categories, recently completed. They've applied for land use, they've applied for development permit, they're in progress, you know, so, but those are pretty imminent stages. Like within a couple of years, those will, even the ones that are in planning will, you know, be under development if not completed.
Thank you.
I was just going to say that the number we're working at for our purposes is 55,000 approximately, plus or minus 25%.
Okay.
So that's, you know, but that doesn't mean that Calgary Elbow is sitting perfect. There's always room for change, but that's the number we're going to work around.
Okay. Okay. No, that's good. Yeah, I'm not sure, again, what the numbers are in Glamorgan versus Lakeview. And, you know, that's, I was just basically trying to draw a more or less perfect square so it doesn't look quite as gerrymandered as it does right now, but.
Thank you.
Okay.
Trevin? No questions. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much,
Thank you.
Ms. Maxwell. Thank you. You're excused. No, okay. Okay. Julie Pithers? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Sorry, I was hoping to hear more people before I came up. I haven't done this before, so thanks for the opportunity. Let's see. I guess I'll just fire away.
Yeah, just introduce yourself. Tell us what electoral division you're from.
Okay.
And,
All right. Julie Pithers, P as in pneumonia, I-P-H-E-R-S.
Just on our toes, yeah.
And I'm Banff Kananaskis.
Okay.
All right. Well, as you have just found out, I'm from what would be considered a rural riding. We have lots of small towns in it. It's a big, big riding, goes all the way up to Jasper. But I don't feel that I'm owed any more of a vote than anybody in the city here. And I have the feeling that, and I should have looked this up beforehand, but, you know, certainly the vast majority of our population's in the cities, but I would imagine the second most is surrounding the cities. And I, like most of those people, will commute into the city, will use the city's many services and products, and not pay the municipal taxes that the people in the city pay. I pay lower taxes than people who have the same kind of house that I have and the same amount of property I have, and I believe that that is my benefit of living in the country, where I also get peace and quiet. Yes, I don't have a library right beside me, but we live in 2025, so I can download library books all day long and phone Cochrane and update my library card should I need to. And I think that having large cities is important, and I think people who live in large cities put up with an awful lot that I don't have to put up with, between sirens and road closures and everything else that, you know, often benefits me. I might be the one in the ambulance with the siren going, that they shouldn't have a lesser vote than I have. And don't know too much about my own district as if I have 1.5 votes or 1-to-1 almost, but I do know that lots of rural ridings have each person's vote is worth much more than somebody who lives downtown here. And I've been reading some stories of people who believe that they should have more of a say in government because they live in an area where raw materials are brought to bear, given royalties and so on to our province, and it's worth a lot. Sure, but that's saying that people who are rich should have more of a vote than people who are poor. And money and business shouldn't have anything to do with democracy. And to that logic, are we saying that the lumber producer brings more value than the construction company, and therefore the lumber person should have more say in what goes on every single day of our lives? And one of the other things was somebody said that it was really important for them to see their MLA face to face, and they have to drive hundreds of kilometers to see them. Well, I've seen my MLA once, and she came pretty close to my house, and I went out and saw her, and it was no big deal. Again, we live in 2025. We can phone or FaceTime or Zoom or whatever we want with our MLA. But if we were going to do something for this province, it would be massive broadband for everybody in the rural ridings as well that would allow them to have this face-to-face that it's so valuable. And finally, I think just for the sake of making things straightforward, our democracy of just counting people and your vote is worth this much and your vote is worth this much is the easiest way for us to be a proper democracy and not have, many people and condensed into one place, and they don't have as much say over something that's so important to us all, and they're putting up with an awful lot that we in the country don't have to put up with. So my feeling about this is that it should be 1-to-1 as much as possible, and more ridings should be in the big cities because, a big part of the power of this province is there. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Ms. Fithers. The commissioners will have, I'm sure, some questions, starting with Mr. Evan.
No questions. Thank you for your submission.
Swanson?
Thanks. No, that was good, but I don't have any questions.
Okay.
Can I ask you, what part of BK do you live in?
I'm Elbow Valley, so just out Highway 8.
Okay.
Almost on the border of
Okay.
especially with the Pony Trail.
Okay. Dr. Martin?
Yeah.
No, but thank you.
No, I will just thank you very much for your presentation. That was,
all right. Well, thank you
great.
very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
And just so you know, Banff Cochrane has been very represented today. It must be some tourism thing that.
Exactly.
I grew up in the area too. I came from Springbank, so Cochrane is my arch enemy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Michael Parker.
You don't need to thank the map.
Okay.
Thanks. So my name is Mike Parker. Appreciate the time to talk to you today. I'm very fortunate to live in the summer village of Wipers, which is in the riding of Banff Kananaskis. So, I do think it is a unique riding. It is a blend of First Nations, tourism, agriculture, and ranching. Part of my personal experience, I've worked in the oil and gas industry for 40 years, also currently a member of our volunteer fire department. And of those, of the last 23 years, most of them have been in Alberta. I've lived 10 years in Calgary, and before in 2016, I moved out to Wipers, which is in the Ghost River Valley. I think that gives me a unique perspective on kind of the differences of what, as the prior speaker said, there definitely is a difference of what's important to people living in the city. I lived in the inner city of Calgary, and what was important to me then is definitely different than what's important to me now, living in the Ghost Valley. I guess I've got what I wanted to. I've got about 4 key requests that I'd like to ask the commission consider as you move forward with your work. I'll summarize them and then I'll go over a little bit more detail. First is that the writings be fair and logical. Is that more in a minute? I think communities within an area that have the same issues, same concerns, should be grouped within a writing. I also think because the writings are going to be in effect for 10 years, that not only the current population, but the future population, any growth should be considered when you're looking at the boundaries. And then the last one is, I do think, for a couple of reasons I'll point out, I think Banff Kananaskis can, probably should stay close to the boundaries, should not change much. As far as a fair and logical writing, I think as you probably noticed from my accent, I'm not originally from Canada. Up until 2002, I lived in the U.S. One of the things I noticed when I moved to Canada was the writings actually were kind of looked very logical. The ones within the cities were within the cities. They had a kind of a logical shape, and it appeared most of the communities that were in the writing had similar likes, interests, and stuff. This is very different than I was used to in the States, where due to gerrymandering, a lot of the writings look completely ridiculous, all for the explicit purpose of trying to marginalize one party's votes. And so I just ask, like I said, I think Alberta has done a great job up to now, so I just ask that you continue that policy of coming up with logical writings. As far as communities with similar interests being in the same writing, kind of ties back to my first point. I think as much as possible, to allow the MLA to accurately and effectively represent their writing, it helps if most of the people within the communities have similar interests, likes, concerns, economic issues, geographic commonalities. If you look at Banff Kananaskis, we've got Lake Louise, Banff, Canmore, Bow Valley, the Ghost River Valley, and then on the west side we do have several. We have communities, Springbank, west side of Calgary. We have Springbank, Bragg Creek, and while at first glance there definitely is differences between them, one of the things that is common within our writing is that the environment, tourism, wildlife preservation is very important to those that live in the riding. Okay, and I can say that as someone that has lived both in Calgary and in the Ghost River Valley, our issues are definitely different than people that live in Cochrane or Calgary. And I think it'd be a disservice to both groups to lump them together or to mix them. I think we both need MLAs that can represent our concerns. Next one, as far as future growth, I think my understanding is, so current population is 52,000. We actually, I think we are close to 1-to-1. We're not, I think so we're a little bit below the average. I know y'all are shooting for the 55,000. However, Banff Kananaskis has shown significant growth in the last few years, unlike other rural ridings. And actually, because of the recent approval of several development projects in Canmore, within the next 10 years, Canmore is going to be probably adding about 14,000, almost doubling in size due to the new housing developments, which would be just that in itself, without considering the other growth happening in Bragg Creek and up where I live, would add probably almost 30% to the riding.
So again, I know y'all are based on your numbers today, but I do think there will be, by the time you come around the next time, there will be significant growth. So it'd be better if we're close to that 55 now and not up around that 25% that y'all are allowed. And then the last item was, as far as, my reasoning for why Banff Kananaskis boundaries shouldn't be changed, besides the reason I just said, was, it's actually only been a riding since 2015. In the last redraw, it was, used to be, Cochrane was in with with Banff. So significant redraw on the last time, and it is growing, continues to grow, and I think while it is a diverse riding, I think we do have a commonality of love of the environment and love for the place we live. So I think it's our desire would be, for the most part, understand there will be tweaks, but to try to keep the riding as it is, just because it is fairly new. With that, I'd just like to close by saying, again, I think Banff Kananaskis is unique, and also, offers, because of tourism and other things, offers a lot to the Alberta environment, economy, and just ask that you consider my request in your work as you move forward. So.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Clark, any questions?
Yeah, first, thank you very much for your presentation and the context you've provided and your unique background, having moved, chosen to move to Canada and have had that experience in the U.S. is really not something that we've heard yet. And I find that really compelling, and also a reminder that part of our role here is clear and understandable boundaries. So what I've heard is you've talked about a couple of aspects of that, just the natural communities of interest, but also it's only been around for a couple of elections. And also the numbers are sort of right around the midpoint, and you've got some predictable growth. So sort of a bunch of things I'm hearing that are fairly compelling to say, probably this is one, at least in my, estimation, may not be worth, we want to be careful, I guess, about, and some of the presentations previous have talked about putting the Stoney Dakota nations perhaps together, adding on pieces, which wouldn't have a massive impact kind of population. But I guess maybe I would ask, if we do need to make some of those sorts of tweaks, are there particular parts of the constituency you feel don't fit in terms of like with like, or?
I would say the one that doesn't fit is the one that is Elbow Valley.
Okay.
Because unlike Greenbank, there are, they are close to town, they do use it, but it's more in acreages, typically in Springbank. Elbow Valley is for the most part, is a subdivision that just happens to be outside of the city limits of Calgary. Right? So that would be my one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Martin?
I've got to ask, what part of the U.S. did you come from?
Texas. Yep. My wife and I are both graduates from UT.
We're bonded. I wanted to press you further on your growth assertions, which I've heard from other people today who are in your writings. So I'm not disputing the fact. I just want, first of all, to get the number again. So you had suggested that in the coming decade, as the various known development permits convert themselves into buildings,
right?
That you might have as many as 20,000 added. Was that
the number? I've seen 14,000 is one number that I've seen just for the Three Sisters development.
Yeah.
I think there are a couple other smaller developments. I think Silver Creek is adding some, and there's another that I've seen up to 17,000 potential. But yeah, I think if I was quoting the Three Sisters, which is the one that I've been in. I'm expecting it's going to go very fast because this is the one that's been planned for 20 years. It's been in dispute, and then finally, just this last year, it was finally approved. So I think, it's going to be. I would expect fairly quick that they start building on it. But yeah, now the 14,000 I think would be obviously over a long period of time.
Okay, thank you very much.
correct me if I'm wrong though, sir, isn't that Three Sisters still in litigation and
No,
it's been concluded?
it's been concluded, yes.
Okay, so it is not a contingent.
No, it has been approved, yes. I think last summer, if I remember right, yeah. Or late in the year. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. We had other people present on the Banff Kananaskis, and it was brought to our attention for things coming in. We should look at Eden Valley and the Bighorn Reserve, and we should take Millerville out because Millerville is split. Do you have any comments on those, or are you familiar with those areas where they are residing?
Millerville, I'm so the other two, you said the Bighorn.
Bighorn Reserve and Eden Valley. They're both indigenous areas.
In other districts right now.
In other districts.
They're not in, but they're all part of the same.
Okay. That I would say bringing them in probably would make sense then. I mean, if it is, yeah, like you said, I think if it is the First Nations and it would make sense to pull them together. Millerville, I would say there's, unlike Elbow Valley, is very distinct. Now, Millerville is not much different than British, or even, we have ranches and ranchers and agriculture up where I am in the Ghost Valley. So there's not a reason I would say particularly move it out. However, if Millerville is split, then I would say, yeah, I mean, I think moving it out would probably make sense. If I was Millerville, I would not want to be split.
Right.
It is also very, if you look at it, it's as the prior speaker mentioned, she had met with their MLA, and that's because our MLA actually goes around and every month, because our riding is so big, actually has sessions in like all over
the communities.
County.
Nice.
But yeah, basically, you get to Millerville, he's doing an hour and a half drive to get down to Millerville.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is on the far end of the riding, and so yeah, I mean I think if that would be an area, if it was split, that would logically say.
Okay, and just for clarification, you said it would be a better fit with Elbow Valley out. Did I understand you correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean to me, whereas Millerville, I wouldn't say there's a reason to move it except for if it's split.
Yeah.
Then I understand.
Yeah.
Elbow Valley, I would say, if you look at the people there are people that are working in Calgary, or I mean, what I said about the love of them, not that they. I think it is a different. It is a neighborhood. There's really nothing different than Elbow Valley than a subdivision in Calgary.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay.
Any questions?
Yeah. You live in the summer village of
Wipers.
Okay, and if I got it right, it's about 50 people.
Yeah, I think there are 70. There's 70 homes. It was initially developed in the early 60s as a summer village. And I think it is about 50% of the houses now are full-time residents. Right. So yeah, that 50 sounds right.
Actually, it says 64, and then Ghost Lake is 75. How close are the two together?
Ghost, it's about a 15. As the crow flies, it's about 10 kilometers. As driving it, it's about a 25-minute drive. Because you basically have to.
Okay.
It's if I can.
Yeah.
Point out. So, so this is Ghost Lake. Oh, actually, that is right. That little white area you can see right between the lake and the reserve. That's Ghost Lake.
Oh, okay.
This is Highway 40, and basically this is Wipers Creek. This is Ghost River, and the summer village of Wipers is right there.
So how far are you from Canmore?
30 kilometers. We go to Canmore for groceries and.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Parker. Much appreciated. Your insights are valuable. So I'll excuse you, but feel free to stay and hear the rest of the presentation. Our next two don't appear to be here, so Kathleen Ganley. Half an hour early.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and thanks for having me early. I'll wait till the writing's up. Oh, there it is. Okay, so good afternoon. Thanks for having me here. I'm Kathleen Ganley. I'm the MLA for Calgary Mountain View, and I've had the incredible privilege of serving in that role since 2019. I was first elected to the Legislative Assembly in 2015, representing Calgary Buffalo. I served as the Minister of Justice and Solicitor General for 4 years, and the Minister of then Aboriginal Relations, now Indigenous Relations, for 8 months. I'm here today to make representations for the people in my community, but also to speak to the larger issues of maintaining a fair system that respects the votes of Albertans and maintains faith in our institutions. So I'd like to thank the Commission to begin with for your service. I think the work you're here today to do is incredibly important, and it'll affect the right to representation of the people of this province. I'm a partisan, obviously, but I'm also a big believer in democracy, and the work you do today will set the process for institutions that's more important than the aims of any political party. So Calgary Mountain View is an inner city riding. Many of the communities I represent have been around for half a century, and many for considerably more than that. They're amazing places. One of both the main stresses and opportunities in our communities is growth. So many neighborhoods are revitalizing and densifying. There's a tension between those who want to preserve the communities they love as they always have been, and those who need more housing supply in order to afford to live there. Community schools are bursting at the seams, including the elementary school my own daughter attends, which is currently a K-5 school instead of K-6 to accommodate so many students. The communities in Calgary Mountain View, I would say, share a lot in common with the immediate adjoining communities. There is a natural boundary, as you can see on the south there, that is the Bow River that lies between Mountain View and Buffalo. But in terms of the other divisions, like the communities are similar to one another, but they're also similar, I would say, to the immediately adjoining communities in some ways. And I would say that, you know, those immediately adjoining communities, they all sort of share a certain community of interest. So what I would say is probably top concerns, shortage of housing supply, high costs, stagnating wages, overcrowded schools and hospitals are some of the most common concerns in the communities I represent, but also I would say in the immediately adjoining communities. These inner city communities I do think need to be kept together because they share a commonality of interest, but I'm not going to argue for sort of specific boundaries one way or the other, because those inner city neighborhoods tend to share quite a lot in common. And because my riding is in the middle of all of them in the north, you know, there's a lot of commonality. What is relevant, I think, is that these concerns differ from concerns in rural areas. And I'd like to highlight some of the ways in which they do so. So, for instance, schools in Calgary are overutilized. Libraries and gym stages have been used as classrooms. By contrast, communities where schools are underutilized and they in rural areas struggle to cover the basic costs associated with infrastructure. While students in Calgary may struggle due to overcrowded classrooms, in rural communities, fewer students means that there may not be enough teachers to have specialists in different subject areas such as computer science or even physics. My constituents in Calgary generally faced hospitals bursting at the seams, while those in rural Alberta faced closed ERs. Both are significant challenges, but they're different. Calgary is a community that is growing rapidly, putting strain on services. That presents different challenges than communities that are shrinking or struggling to stay afloat as a result. Those concerns deserve to be represented, all of them, but they're different. And it's the job of this commission to recognize that and to keep those communities of interest together per Section 14 of the Act. And I believe that municipalities are communities of interest. This seems like an obvious point, but I think it's also critical. Municipalities have historically been communities of interest, and they have been that has been respected by this commission with very limited exceptions, and I would argue that this should continue to be the case. Those who argue otherwise, in my opinion, bear the onus of proving it. The burden of proof should rest with them because they are the ones arguing for a change. And I truly struggle to see how they could possibly prove that diluting different interests would better represent anyone. The point of representative democracy is for communities to have their different interests represented. This is still reflected in the Act today. Section 14B references communities of interest, including municipalities, regional and rural communities, Indian reserves, and Métis settlements. In addition, Section 14E references the desirability of clear boundaries, and municipalities represent a clear boundary. Calgarians identify as just that, Calgarians. Calgary is growing rapidly, as are many mid-sized cities in their surrounding areas. Section 14A deals with sparsity, density, and the rate of population growth, and Section 15 explicitly deals with limiting variance in size. I would argue this strongly argues for more ridings in Calgary, particularly in areas that are growing rapidly. This is also reflected in our Constitution, the Supreme Court's interpretation of it. I would add that rapid growth should not be used to argue that municipal boundaries shouldn't be respected. In fact, keeping those communities of interest together and ensuring representation is precisely what the Supreme Court relied on in allowing variance in size in the 1991 Saskatchewan provincial boundaries case. The Commission will determine rules that are critical to preserving our democracy. We find ourselves, I would say, in very interesting times. Faith in our basic institutions, our systems of justice, our democracy are waning. I could write an entire novel on why, but the critical point is that we must do everything we can to keep these institutions just and preserve public confidence. Growing cynicism about democracy is a problem we should all address, and this Commission can do that by ensuring that we are empowering people to choose for themselves, not to try to choose for them by forcing different interests together. So I come before this committee to argue for the obvious, that rural communities, mid-sized cities, and large urban centers all deserve a voice. I'm yellow. Okay. So I think I've outlined the specific concerns in sufficient detail in terms of the differences between my city and the rural areas. I think to maintain faith in democracy, we should respect those boundaries and ensure that all of those voices are heard. And this Commission has the power to do so. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Scanley. Mr. Evans, any questions or comments?
Yeah, so you premise your argument on the fact that you've defined Calgary Mountain View to be a community of interest. But in looking at the legislation, you'll agree with me that it doesn't have its own municipal boundary. It doesn't have a regional or rural community. It's not an Indian reserve, it's not a Métis settlement. So explain to me how that's a community of interest. That's part one. Part two is, what is the connection with everything above 16th Avenue Northwest to what's below it?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to be clear, what I'm arguing is that inner city Calgary communities generally have a community of interest. So if—
What are they though? What is it? Define it for me.
Oh, sure. So it's really what I was outlining, that the people in those communities are experiencing similar things. So growth pressures in neighborhoods are creating a tension between those who want more development and those who would like to to keep their communities as they always were. There's significant pressure on things like schools and hospitals because of the growth. There's also pressure on the infrastructure in the inner city generated both by people living in sort of more suburban communities and by those kind of driving in. I would say I'm not saying that you need to maintain these boundaries specifically. I want to be very clear about that. I think that these communities mostly share a community of interest with each other, but they also share that community of interest with, say, Calgary Klein, which is immediately to the north, or Calgary Varsity, which is immediately to the west. Inner city communities in Calgary are very similar. I think they should be kept together as much as possible, but I'm not arguing for any specific line on this map. I do know that community associations generally prefer to be in one riding if that can be accommodated.
That's my next question. How many community associations are within this group? Because I think those could be characterized as communities of interest.
Yeah, so, oh gosh, how many community associations? So West Hillhurst, Sunnyside, Ridgeland, Crescent Heights. Oh gosh, I'm going to say like fewer than 10. There's actually one, so in the west end there.
Are there any that are split by the boundaries?
Yes. So Parkdale is split between Calgary Mountain View and Calgary Varsity. And that's, okay. Do you want me to show you over by 28th?
If you wouldn't mind.
Yeah.
If we have time.
Yeah, so, the light. So right over here on the far end of the riding, this is a community that's split. Generally, they actually just get 2 MLAs that show up to their event. So I haven't heard any sort of specific complaints, but yes, communities do generally, in my experience, prefer to be kept together. Oh, sorry, I should have stayed up there. Because so over here, communities tend to work together. So you have kind of Capitol Hill working with Banff Trail Community Center. So they're very close. They often work together. But I think the challenge that this commission faces, in my opinion, is that a lot of those communities sort of work together with one another, right? So arguably, depending on the sort of size of the population, which is, I guess, somewhat over what you would expect, it used to be, so the previous changes were to kind of grow it north of 16th Avenue, if you will, so those communities could go back to where they were before, but you could carve it in several ways. Other than the Bow River sort of there to the south and Deerfoot Trail to the east, there's no really obvious natural boundaries, I wouldn't say, which I guess makes your work difficult and easy.
16th doesn't work as a boundary, and
16th could absolutely be seen as a natural boundary. So most of the communities themselves sort of divide off there, north and south of 16th. But like honestly, the commonality is sort of services relied on in terms of school districts, in terms of people shopping for their groceries, just the stuff of everyday life, often cross 16th Avenue one way or the other.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
For you. Did you have a robust discussion in the legislature about why only 2 ridings were required for the change, like going from 87 to 89?
So I'll admit I wasn't in there every moment. We do tend to come and go in shifts. There was some discussion, but this was it was the proposal that came in with the government's legislation. It would, honestly, it's my view, so this was done when we were in government in 2017. We kept the same number of seats because we don't really feel like additional MLAs are necessarily a net benefit. I don't know how else to say it, but it doesn't seem like more representation is necessarily needed. And so we had sort of that, it keeps the cost down for the people of Alberta. So that was the decision we made at the time. 2 isn't a huge increase. And my recollection from the last time we did this exercise was that because some of the northern ridings are significantly under in population, but they're really, really big. And obviously there's going to need to be more ridings in the city to sort of keep within that 25% variance, right? So I imagine that was done in order to, protect those from getting too big. Although, honestly, with the advancement of technology, the size of a riding actually isn't, I would say, as relevant as it was even 10 years ago, right? So I guess that's me speculating, sorry.
Okay, no, that's good, thanks.
You had mentioned that definitely Calgary should get should get more electoral divisions. How many?
Oh, I honestly, I hadn't contemplated the specific numbers. I would need to see the math. Like, I know my writing is a little bit over, but some of my colleagues, like particularly in the Northeast, their writings are like massively over the normal number. And at a certain point, it does become quite difficult to represent those communities because you're trying to be in so many places at once, right? It makes it a little bit harder to be there for everyone. Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, I'd have to run the math, but my suggestion would be the committee has suggested a number that would sort of divide the province up roughly equally. I would suggest that you divide the number of folks in Calgary by that, and that's the number of ridings that need to go in.
Okay. Thank you. Dr. Martin?
Thank you, and thank you. One of the things we have found by being on this commission, well, several of them. First, we have people thanking us in sort of a sorrowful fashion, like what's coming at us. But, your riding is over. You're an inner city riding. I understand the kind of issues that animate discussions among the community. I expect as well that there's going to be infill and basements that are going legal, and there'll be lots of pressure to increase the number of housing units by one means or another. So I fully expect that you'll have more housing and you will have more population. And your characterization of your writings suggests you're very much like some of the writings on the inner south side of the river. So we can expect that the population will continue to grow for some time. So you're 60. Here's our problem, obviously. We're 62, and you're 62,500. Our mean is 55,000, and there's some variation that we can play with, but you're too big and you're growing. So we're going to have to decide how best to alter ridings that have these kind of features. And instantly we have ripple effects all across the city. So if I took to make a crude example, everything north of 16 Ave, instantly there'd be a tidal wave moving north. So we have a lot of balls to juggle. But if I could get down to brass tacks, if you had to shrink it, just can you clarify what you did at the map? Would you try to nibble at the western end?
You could nibble at the western edge. You could also, so previously it ended at 16th Avenue, which is also a possibility. So those neighborhoods were in Calgary-Klein in the 2015 election. And I think, honestly, so if you're carving off on the west, it goes into Varsity. On the north, it probably goes into Klein.
Yeah.
Both of those ridings, most of the communities they have share a pretty significant amount in common with Calgary Mountain View. I don't think people would find themselves ill-represented by either of those moves, if that helps you at all.
Well, I think it does, because we are concerned about effective representation and about the relationship between the population and the MLA. And so if you feel that that could be accommodated, we'll probably look at those kind of scenarios pretty closely.
Yeah, you could look on, because of the way Calgary-Klein kind of sticks down on the south side of Deerfoot Trail there, you could also look at the eastern edge. So honestly, that's why it's difficult for me to make a recommendation to you, is because they all share a community of interest, but also with those immediately around them. So there are a lot of different number scenarios, and I don't want to how to put it. I don't want to suggest how you have to do it, because I don't think that any of those are super bad options.
Okay. I don't want to press you. You love all your people.
I do.
But,
I love all my constituents.
you can see from where we sit, you think, 65,500. Yeah, how's the growth pattern going to go? I think we're bumping up on our ceiling. So the next thing you do is to think, where can we nibble?
Yeah, that's totally legitimate.
Okay, thank you.
Art? Yeah, thank you. Yes, enhancer is forever, so you have to be careful what you say on terms of which community you might recommend. I wanted to come back to the beginning of your presentation. I found quite compelling your discussion around what anchors us as a commission. Section 3 of the Constitution, Supreme Court, reference cases, the Act, now here we are. Maybe I'll just sort of ask you to kind of complete that thought in just maybe 90 seconds or less. What aspects of the constitutional / legal framework do you feel it's important for us to remember?
Yeah, so I would say probably the most important thing is to work to keep those communities of interest together and to make sure that people feel represented. I think we have seen south of the border, and admittedly that was sort of spun up, shall we say, but what can happen if people don't feel appropriately represented? And I think we do see an erosion of faith in our institutions. So my concern is that we respect natural boundaries, and municipal boundaries are, in my view, such natural boundaries. And I think allowing those interests to have a representative is critical.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Ganley. All presenters are equal, but we are particularly gratified when an MLA comes and talks to us, because we know that you're writing very well. I have one more question. Because I'm the chair, I can go over time. You have the unique position of having served 2 electoral divisions in Calgary.
Yeah.
Any comments, 30 seconds or less, about Calgary-Buffalo?
Yeah, so Calgary-Buffalo is a fantastic riding. It's much more urban. It has, again, a natural sort of boundary, I would say, to the north on it. It's got a similar thing, although there's some more, like on the southern portion, sort of where Deerfoot comes through and Blackfoot comes through, there's some more sort of like clear natural boundaries. And then it abuts. I actually always felt like the lines between Elbow and Buffalo were in interesting places, much like the lines between Mountain View and Varsity are. Those communities share a lot in common, I would say, in terms of their kind of densification and general experience of life.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. You're excused, but please stay if you can to hear the rest of it.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much. Thank you.
Where am I here? Our next present is Dr. Angela Grace present. Please come forward.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to share my perspective on the upcoming changes to Alberta's electoral boundaries. I will not be as well-spoken as a 2-time MLA, but I'm happy to share my experiences and perspective. I do have a unique Albertan perspective, having lived and worked in various rural and urban communities in Alberta. I had the privilege of growing up on a farm in the Drumheller-Stettler electoral division, and have since lived in Red Deer South, Lethbridge West, Tabor-Warner, Brooks Medicine Hat, and now Calgary Varsity. I've had the opportunity to experience the unique identity and pride of each community, and how the elected officials interact with the community and represent us in the legislature. Even though I now live in the largest city in Alberta, I can't help but keep my rural roots of wanting to know and trust my elected representative, shopping locally, and honestly not wanting to drive more than 20 minutes for any of my services. Community pride is one of the core values of each community I've lived and worked in. Each rural community I lived in prided itself on its unique identity, ranging from the unique geographical landmarks, from the rolling wheat fields of the Alberta prairies, to the trees in Cypress Hills, and the big bridge, and of course the wind in Lethbridge. Each community I lived in shows their own distinguishing landmarks, ranging from the world's largest teepee in the city of Medicine Hat to the world's largest poppy in the village of Veteran, Alberta. There's a seasonal flow of community events in rural Alberta with high school graduations, rodeos, and curling bonspiels. The sense of community pride is strong. The urban communities I have lived in have prided themselves on educational excellence. Red Deer College, the University of Lethbridge, the University of Calgary. Although there is a different seasonal flow in the urban areas with community events, the identity of each community is still unique. For example, Calgary Varsity has a different sense of community than Calgary North and Calgary Northeast due to their unique and expanding population characteristics based on the history of the community, age, culture, and socioeconomic factors. Unfortunately, I have also experienced how this sense of individual community identity and pride has also led to distrust in other communities. We have to acknowledge that the rural-urban divide in Alberta is strong and seems to be increasing with community identity, individualism, and partisanship, placing itself over shared human values and collaboration. Unfortunately, this rural-urban divide and increasing partisanship has increased tensions and shaken Albertans' sense of democracy. I contend that the recreation of electoral boundaries is a non-partisan opportunity to reestablish shared human values and strengthen a sense of democracy across our province. You as a committee appointed to work on required changes to electoral boundaries have an obligation to all Albertans to be non-partisan and to respect community boundaries, pride, identity, and the foundations of democracy in your upcoming proposed changes. There needs to be a clear intention to focus on collaboration and fair representation rather than risk fostering increasing rural-urban division and mistrust. I contend that the nonpartisan and interactive process of maintaining respect for geography, community identity, and population changes be the foundation for electoral boundary decision-making. Arbitrarily breaking up communities to change electoral boundaries does not make sense. It also does not make sense to shift electoral boundaries to a pie-shaped inclusion of both rural and urban in each electoral district, as I understood has been proposed. From my perspective, combining rural and urban in the same electoral district would instigate increased confusion and mistrust within already established geographical boundaries, decrease a sense of community identity, increase a sense of disenfranchisement, and significantly muddy the waters for effective community representation. With distinct rural and urban electoral districts, there is a clear sense of representation for each of the needs of each area. Within mixed districts, it would be unclear whose needs and voices the elected official would actually represent in the community. First, I firmly believe it is important that geography be preserved as its existing foundation for deciding on changes to electoral boundaries. Existing geographical boundaries provide a sense of identity based on the land in which people live. It only makes sense to maintain, as much as possible, already established geographical boundaries as a first step in examining the need to change the electoral boundaries. That being said, of course, there are population shifts within each of these boundaries. Second, I believe that community identity needs to be preserved as the second priority in the upcoming changes to electoral boundaries. It makes logical sense to keep like-minded and like-experienced communities together for identity, ease, efficiency, and local representation. There's a shared sense of identity, culture, and infrastructure needs that need to be respected and preserved. Within these geographical boundaries are already established rural and urban and cultural and socioeconomic communities with their own characteristics, needs, and sense of community pride. For example, in the rural Drumheller Stettler district where I grew up in, it makes sense to maintain the rural identity with local representation. In the same sense, it makes sense to maintain current urban district identities with a focus on already established community boundaries set by urban planning and new community development. It is important that elected officials understand and seek to represent their unique characteristics. Third, I believe that once already established geographical boundaries and communities have been identified, it then makes sense to look at Alberta's population data to make decisions about expanding, shrinking, or adding new electoral districts. This is where you have the responsibility to make logical, nonpartisan decisions. So based on current and future population growth, to me it makes the most sense to add North Calgary and South Edmonton as new electoral districts. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the punchline. Mr. Clark, any questions?
No, thank you, Dr. Race. I'll just say thank you for your thoughtful presentation. You clearly put some time into that. It is really very helpful. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
I'll echo my colleagues' thought. Thank you again.
I do too, and thank you for coming out.
All the pressure. Like, we got one question.
I have one in reserve.
Oh, thank goodness. Okay, yeah, well then.
Okay, we're good.
So,
Defer to the commissioner.
you touched on an issue that is could be described as philosophical, but intensely practical and pragmatic as well. I think I quoted you directly.
That's exactly how I strive to be.
Okay, well, it came through loud and clear. But I want to put to you another case. You said rural-urban divide is as strong as it's ever been in Alberta. Now, we have heard from presenters already that say, you know what? The way to address, and I'm paraphrasing, the way to address the divide is lump some people together so they learn how to get along. After all, your federal or our federal cousins, whoever the members of parliament are, many of them, maybe even 50% of them, have mixed urban-rural riding, and they get by. What do you say to that?
Well, first, lumping people together and see how they get along isn't a great way to increase collaboration. Like, there's got to be some structure for
outside of parenting. It doesn't.
Yeah, and outside of teaching grade 1,
and outside of multiculturalism,
either, you know.
Foundation of our country.
I do think that in these very challenging political times, that people need a reprieve, and they need a rest, and they need to know that they're going to be really represented. So as people are bringing up their concerns to their elected representative, they need to be able to trust that things aren't going to change so much that it causes so much destruction. So just it's been in my observation and experience that when you lump people together, it actually increases a sense of mistrust. It increases a sense of butting heads, and there's not enough listening. So if people are able to stay within their own geographical and like-minded boundaries, with, of course, you know, some political philosophical changes on how to have that representation, it's going to make people feel safer and calmer and more relaxed. They actually are being heard.
Okay. Anything arising out of that question?
Good answer.
Yeah, I have philosophically, isn't there an incongruence with the concept of multiculturalism and everything that we espouse to be beneficial in that regard? And yet at the same time, you're talking about, well, it almost seems a bit xenophobic to me in terms of the, like, keep like with like. Explain to me the incongruence.
Well, the incongruence is if we go down if we go down to the roots of what a lot of the divide is, we have to talk about racism. And until the issue of racism and people's willingness to address their internalized sense of racism and white supremacy in this province, it's going to be really hard for people to collaborate on these very differences in each of the geographical and community areas that we need to address.
Well, let's assume that premise is correct. Okay, for argument's sake. How is what you've proposed, in terms of your philosophy in solving this problem and the guidance you provided the commission, how is any of what you've said today ameliorate that concern? It doesn't. You actually have talked about separating.
You're right.
Right.
It doesn't address that concern.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understood. Yeah. Okay.
But what it does do is it can help settle people down that there's not going to be so many drastic changes and political changes all at once. It says, okay, we're going to take a very logical, nonpartisan, sensible way of addressing the population changes and the geographical changes. Well, not so much geographical, but population changes, like rural communities shrinking, urban communities growing. We're going to try to make it as even as possible so that people can have the representation that they need. So that's all it's doing, is saying let's slow things down and be really logical about it.
But would it be correct that the proper way to solve this would be to identify and group communities of interest based on race and culture? Is that what you're suggesting?
No, I'm not. Well, I'm saying my observation and understanding is a lot of these communities are grouping themselves.
Okay, I think that's a fair comment.
Like, we don't need to group them. They're grouping themselves.
And if we look at Calgary varsity, what we've talked about, is any of that applicable to this particular electoral district? In terms of, are there portions here where you could say, well, this neighborhood, for example, is they're like-minded in many different ways, and be able to identify that as compared to, say, another neighborhood within that?
So, I liked what Kathleen said, and you guys alluded to as well, in communities working together. So in my area, there's Charleswood, Trywood, Varsity that tend to work together, and then there's the other side of Crowchild with with Varsity over there, Varsity Estate, and then Brentwood, Dalhousie. So there are the different communities that tend to lump themselves together. I would contend that the university district is a special district on its own because of the more transient, ever-changing student population that's there. So there are unique characteristics, but I would say as a whole, that area has high education as one of its foundations.
Thank you very much. Appreciate our fulsome discussion.
Yeah. Thanks for putting me on the spot. That was fun.
Thank you very much, Dr. Grace.
It'll make for great answered reading later on.
Okay, our next presenter, and I believe our final presenter of the afternoon, is Mr. Sabir, our friend Sabir. Now, I've said we limit people to 7 minutes with 3 minutes questions. Well, we're a little bit flexible. You're the last presenter of the day. So please proceed, identify yourself and what electoral division you're from.
Well, thank you and good afternoon. I'm Irfan Sabir and I'm a MLA for Calgary Buller-McCall. It's an electoral district in northeast quadrant of Calgary that I have the honor of representing since 2015. It has changed since, but that's the name. And I would add that I'm also a long-term resident of Northeast Calgary. Moved there first in 2007. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon. I want to start by thanking all of you for your commitment to this important work. Certainly, it's a challenging task to create a map that is fair and acceptable for all communities while ensuring effective representation for all Canadians, Albertans, as guaranteed by the Charter and elaborated upon by the Supreme Court of Canada's jurisprudence. I'm confident that you will take this task very seriously and do your best, and my best wishes are with all of you. Last year, the government introduced Bill 31, Justice Statute Amendment Act, which amended the Electoral Boundaries Commission Act, and I want to speak specifically to those changes. One change was that the legislation added 2 new electoral divisions, and I'm very pleased to see that since Alberta's population has grown significantly since the last review of electoral boundaries. Personally, there has been a huge growth in the constituency in the quadrant I represent. My riding stands around 28% of the average population of current electoral district. It's also the case for other neighboring Northeast ridings in Northeast Calgary. Based on this, I would strongly urge that the Commission to consider allocating one of the new electoral division in Northeast Calgary to accommodate the growing population and to ensure effective representation for all residents in the area. Secondly, the Justice Statute Amendment Act also amended Section 14 of the Electoral Boundaries Commission Act, which sets out the relevant consideration for the Commission while creating a new electoral map. I note that prior to this change, among other things, the Commission was required to take into account common community interest and community organization and keep existing community and municipal boundaries intact wherever possible. With this change, while a similar criteria exists, it's now in the discretion of the Commission to consider this. Having said that, I would submit that how Commission exercises its discretion, it will have a huge impact on what the future electoral map of Alberta looks like. And it will also have huge implications for people's right to effective and fair representation and for the institution of democracy as a whole. It's against this backdrop that I would urge the Commission to make sure that common interests of communities are represented and respected, and existing municipal boundaries are respected as much as possible. For instance, in Northeast Calgary, it's a community of its own. It has people from many different backgrounds, cultures, who have come together for decades to create their own organizations, community halls, ethnic restaurants, prayer places, and so much more. It took them decades, as I said. Their lives revolve around their communities. And for example, annexing any Northeast community with neighboring towns of Airdrie or Jasmine may not make any sense at all. Over the last few months, I have had the opportunity to talk to Northeast Calgary residents, their organizations, and with my colleagues across the province about this boundary review, and I can say that they would very much want their communities to be kept together. But these communities have a significant racialized population, and it's also important from the standpoint of fair representation for racialized communities. As I said earlier, that people come from many different backgrounds and talents, and many of them are first generation or second generation immigrants. They have issues that are fairly unique to their communities. They have issues that are common with all Alberta. But any future map must ensure that they are able to maintain effective representation of their interests in their communities. Lastly, I want to submit that communities that have more things in common, they need to be kept intact. For instance, in last boundaries review, my riding was created in a way that surrounds a community hub there called Genesis Center. It's one of the hubs in Northeast, along with Leisure Center and Weaver Center. And in case of Calgary-McCall, Genesis is a go-to place in riding change work well. However, the neighboring riding of Calgary Northeast was divided in a way that one half of its population is on the east side of the Deerfoot and other half is on the west side of the Deerfoot. So based on my observation, like people on the east side of Deerfoot have more things in common with my riding, Genesis Center, Rare Places, restaurant, and all those things than on the other side of the Deerfoot. While people on other side of the Deerfoot will have their own community, which will use and utilize Vivo Center, for instance, way more than people on the east side of Deerfoot will use. So I think that's also an opportunity to learn from the previous review and make amends that will work for our community. And I'm sure that my colleagues and many other Albertans will make submissions that will help guide the Commission's important work. And with that, I thank you for your time and happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Severe. Just a clarification question in terms of the history of your representation. You were first elected in 2015?
Yes.
Is this constituency largely what you represented that first term? The name has changed, I believe.
Yes and no. When in 2015, it included the neighborhoods of Falcon Ridge and Castle Ridge, and also
which are south, are they, or
they are on the south side,
yeah.
And on the north side, it included Skyview and those neighborhoods. Since then, the north side has grown exponentially.
Yeah,
like there are so many other new neighborhoods, Redstone, Cityscape. Even on the north side of my riding, there's a new neighborhood, Savannah, in Saddle Ridge.
Yeah.
When in 2019 it only had maybe 600-700 people. Now it's a neighborhood, grown neighborhood.
Yeah. Okay.
Up and so on.
Okay, Mr. Evans, any questions, comments?
So we see a large chunk of your riding is the airport, but it would appear that where the people are living, it's incredibly dense and growing quickly. I mean, the numbers are currently 70,000. It's a 28.6% growth. But what's more interesting is Calgary Northeast, Calgary Falcon Ridge, Calgary Cross. Those are all growing at extremely rapid rate. Calgary Northeast is 55% increase, and Falcon Ridge 18, and Calgary Cross 11. So, have you hit saturation here, or are there still? I can see some areas that could be developed when I look at an aerial map. Are there more developments going on in your particular riding?
I think for most part, the room for new development is in that Savannah area.
So above Airport Trail Northeast?
Yeah, right by Airport Trail.
Oh, I see. Okay, below it.
It will be on the south side of Airport.
Okay, because there's still some open ground there.
There is still some open ground. Saddle Ridge has very little space on the east side, but I think Saddle Ridge, in that sense, doesn't have much room. And this other area has a lot of businesses, but as such, there's no residential population in this, and hence my suggestion that this area has grown significantly and population is very dense, that Commission considers adding one of the new ridings.
I'm more interested to know, is there more significant growth that's going to happen within that electoral district, or are we moving towards a point of saturation, and is there more growth that's going to, from your perspective, that's going to happen on Falcon Ridge and Cross, for example, or is it going to be above north of Airport Trail, northeast?
Falcon Ridge and Cross consist of more mature neighborhoods.
Okay.
In my opinion, they do have their own representatives. They could take those representation, but I would say that there's not much room in Falcon Ridge or Cross as they exist now. In McCall, only room will be around Savannah, and most of the development is on the north of the airport trail. So it's in Calgary northeast.
Okay, and you heard, the discussion with the last presenter. In terms of the community interest, and if we're going to go into, the community of interest in this particular, in your riding, what would they be?
I think they have their own organizations. They have their own community halls or community-based organizations. They have this Genesis Center, which is not just it's more a community hub which has soccer field, which has event places, which has library and all that. So in those areas, people also have their, as I said, mentioned some restaurants, for instance. So people do tend to stick together in these areas.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
That your riding of Buller-McCall is well over the variance, and I wonder if you could give us some suggestions about those districts that are all humped together to the east. If there is something that would fit nicely with the neighboring riding or anything like that, if you could advise us, since I don't know that neighborhood.
I think, as was mentioned by the chair, once you move one riding, that
you do
starts that effect that the next riding will have issue.
Like the Calgary airport area, am I looking at that correctly in that there's minimal residential in that on the left-hand side of the riding? It's airport.
There is no residential.
No residential. It just falls in those four quarters. Yeah. Okay.
I'm a bit digressing, but last time, I think Greg will remember when they were reviewing it, they tried to name it this riding as Calgary Airport. So I hope Commission doesn't take that route.
You want us to write that wrong?
No.
Got
Okay, thank you. Dr. Martin?
Thank you. And you're squished in behind the airport, and and it leads to me asking, are there many airport workers who live in this riding?
Yes, there are, but at the same time, it's airport for Calgary, so people from all over Calgary do work there. But there are many businesses in this area that people in Northeast Quadrant own and run.
Where I'm going with this is about housing types. Do you anticipate 3 or 4 story apartment units?
There is some zoning restrictions as well because of the vicinity of the airport, that what can be built and what cannot be built. For instance, if you are building literally along Métis Trail, you need special permissions. In some cases, depending on which zone you're in, city has to have a resolution, and then cabinet has to give the approval to build something that is
more than 4 stories.
4 stories or something. And also there's issues with the noise as well. So what can go there? For instance, there was in 16, 17, there was a proposal for a school. And there were a lot of issues with respect to how high it can go and how it will be, how they will manage the noise. So that project didn't go ahead, but there are restrictions.
So what you're suggesting then is the area between Métis and 52 Street is going to stay very low density.
This area is likely to stay low density, the one surrounds the airport.
Thank you.
Actually, that makes, I drive through there to get to the airport a lot, so it just struck me now. There's no high-rises, very few high-rises there, which the rest of the city has lots of. Sorry, Mr. Clark.
No, it's a great. It's really important. It's so important for us to hear from MLAs and local community representatives. You just live in the community, right? These sorts of things, and keep talking about it, skating to where the puck is going to be. So a lot of the growth you've really seen clearly in the Northeast, but it's really helpful to get some context on specifically in Deal River Call. So let me ask you about community association. You mentioned Genesis Center as a center of gravity, but what if, how important are those actual community associations, Markdale, Taradale, those sorts of places? If a boundary, an electoral boundary had to cut one in half, for example, to make up numbers, because there's some significant density and it can be a challenge to get the numbers exactly right. Just give me your thoughts on, is that a viable option or is that a terrible idea?
Since there's huge diversity within those ridings, there are people who will associate themselves very strongly with that neighborhood association. They will volunteer for years for the same association, fundraise to put a skating rink there. At the same time, there will be, for instance, name any community, Pakistan Community Association, or Council of Sikh Organization, Kashmir Community Association. Those are associations that may use those facilities, but they do have their own structure as well. And for their bigger events, they may go to either Falconbridge Castle Community Association Hall to Genesis Center. So there are a lot of intersections within those communities. And I don't know, I can fully answer this question.
So what I'm hearing is try really hard not to, but if it's sort of an absolutely kind of no other choice, because part of the grand challenge is especially in Northeast Calgary, even with an extra constituency or two, and there's still a lot of deliberation and consideration in terms of how we're going to square this circle. In fact, I was working on it last night, and I didn't realize, Deerfoot Trail is the boundary, obviously, of Calgary Northeast. No, oh, wait a minute. There's 40,000 people in Calgary Northeast, plus on the west side of Deerfoot Trail. It's almost a constituency all to itself.
Yeah.
But then you start to cascade out, and it just all gets to be a little bit challenging and messy. So we want to do our best to respect those boundaries as best they can. But if it absolutely comes down to it, it would not. I mean, are you going to come back in January and yell at us? I guess that's the real question.
I think I will talk to my constituents, and if they want me to yell at you, I won't hesitate.
Good answer. And well deserved. No, that's helpful. It is. I'm asking a difficult question because it is also deeply hypothetical. It depends on which community, what line, how many people. There's too many what ifs to get. I understand to get a definitive answer, but I think I've got what I need. It's a real pickle. But thank you. That's really helpful.
You've got 4 quarters that make up the whole.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just do the rough math. That's 17,000 people per quarter if it's 70,000 now. 17,500 probably. It would be really hard to take a quarter out of your electoral division, wouldn't it?
So mainly there are 3 neighborhoods.
Oh, okay, okay. I just look at it geographically to see 4 quarters, but.
Yeah, 4 quarters, but 3 neighborhoods. So top 2 quarters.
Do you want to go up to the map and show us where the neighborhoods be? Maybe take the microphone with you.
So these top 2 quarters, that's all salary even comes down to this area as well.
Okay.
And Savannah is included in Saturate. It's a new development, like very recent in last, you can say, 4 or 5 years. But the sign at Savannah will say Savannah in Saturate.
Okay.
So it's part of the Sam Saturate branch. So that's in Saturate. And then Taradale is fairly saturated. There is not much room for development in Taradale.
That's the bottom right quarter.
Yeah, that would be closer to the Stony Trail on the east side.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know how this map is laid, but and then Martindale is among the, I guess, oldest neighborhood in this area. This one is a bit smaller than Taradale and Saturate. Saturate being the biggest, then Taradale, then Martindale.
Okay. Well, that's helpful.
Can I just ask, sorry, what?
Doesn't make it easier, but
No, it makes it not easier at all. But one last question, sorry. Cornerstone or Cityscape, I guess, is it the one just north of Airport Trail? It's not in your constituency. Is Airport Trail a really big natural boundary, or is there some cross pollination there between those neighborhoods?
I guess there are no walkways that people use to get into the other side towards Cityscape or Skyview. Airport Trail is a fairly busy and big artery that connects Stony with the airport. Although it's not in your mandate, but they should put another land there.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, we got talk to us about schools in your constituency.
In Willard McCall, there is one high school. That's Nelson Mandela High School. On the outskirts in Falcon Ridge, there's Bishop McNally. All the schools are at capacity, and kids are being bused to different quadrants, like 45 minutes, in some cases, 1 hour. Okay. Huge issue because of the population growth. And on the other side, towards the north, Cityscape, Redstone, Skyview, like all these neighborhoods are still looking for new school, in particular high school.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. As Mr. Clark has said, always beneficial to hear from individuals who take to heart the people that live day in, day out. Your job is to represent them in the legislature, and your contributions are very much appreciated. I'm not sure that our job is any easier after this, but thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll adjourn the hearing now till 6:30.